AP Computer Science A. This is going to be Unit 4. And this is a note sheet that'll kind of help us explore some ideas before we put it in code. And then I'm going to probably help you guys out with P4A to get you started. So this is called the class composition model. And this is just, multiple classes composed of each other. So we're going to have classes in classes and maybe even more classes in there. So just as an example, and this is the one we're going to actually start to code on P4A, we're going to make a class public. We'll do a little bit of code here. Public class, we'll call it my phone, capitalized first letter of a class name, camel notation, my phone. And maybe some private instance variables that it might have. Private array list. Now, I'll talk about what an array list is in a second. That's one of the kind of the things that we've been exploring in the end of Unit 3. So, and it's going to have songs in it. So we're actually going to start, this is going to end up being P4A, but we're going to start with P3A and build off of it. We'll save it as a new project and do P4A from that. So it's going to hold songs. Array list is like an array. So it's going to hold songs. And, we'll give it some name like song list or something like that. And let's say we have another one. We'll have an array of songs. So one of the things I want to kind of stress is the differences between arrays and array lists and the differences of how we create them. So for an array of songs, you actually start with the object that's going to be in it, and you put these empty brackets, and then you give it a name. We'll call it playlist. But for an array list, you actually say array list, and then in these sharp grouping symbols, you put the type of object that's going to be in it. So there's differences. And we can say in class, my phone. So there'd be a bunch more stuff, but we're just kind of doing the skeleton of it. Now, here's the deal. Inside this is an array list. An array list is an object, and it has songs in it. An array list works very much like an array. The first spot is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and on. The size of this would be 7. It holds 7 things, but we always start at 0. So in that way, it's just like an array. We'll hold, we might say, okay, well, let's put, we might call something song 1 and put it in there, and song 2. So some actual song objects are going to go in here that need to be created. And, I don't know if we would start at, I don't know if we would start at song 0, but, so it's off a little bit from the next, but that's fine. It's going to hold 7 songs, song 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But the spots are going to be in as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now the songs, they're their own class, which we've created already. So we're going to make use of what we've done before. I mean, I don't know if we'll need to change anything or add anything for any specific stuff we're going to do. But we've already done this. Private. It has its own private instance variables like string, name, so forth. End, class, and a string is actually, it's an object itself, right? So songs have strings in them, and strings are objects. And the whole idea of a string is, it's like it's a collection of characters. So we could put a name of a song. Let's see. We'll do a Beatles song. Let it be. Now, a space is a character. I guess we could probably capitalize these. Anyways, that's kind of what a string is. So the My Phone class has an Arraylist class in it, which has song class in it, which has a string class in it. So we have all these layers of things that are inside others. So it's going to be interesting on BlueJ. They actually start to add some arrows and stuff like that. Now, this idea that classes have other classes is what they refer to as a has a relationship. And we're going to talk about a different kind of relationship later in this class. Not today. Has a relationship. A My Phone has an array list that has songs in it, that has strings in it. So has a is kind of an important phrase associated with this idea of class composition. Now, when we go to let's see, like in the constructor, I'll kind of put it down here just to give you, it's public, and then we use the name My Phone, and we're gonna code some of this stuff. And for the 0-hour constructor, we'll probably just put like blank stuff in it. Now we should initialize everything in the constructor. So here we declared it, but don't write equals new yet. In here, we're going to say song list equals new array list. And the way you create an array list is you say array list, and then you put the sharp. So it's very similar to when you declare it. You say what kind of thing is in it, but then you got to put these empty parentheses after it. Okay. Because it's like a method itself. It's like a constructor itself. Playlist is going to be an array. So the way we make arrays is we say new, we put the type of thing that's going to be in there, and then we put the size. Now, array lists, we usually don't put the size because they can change size. Arrays cannot change size. That's one of the things going against them. And then, if you want to fill these up with, probably the array list, we won't put anything in it because it's just size 0 right now, which is fine. The array is size 5, so maybe we'll fill it with some kind of default values. So a for loop would be handy for that if we're just putting the same thing in every spot. So int index equals 0, index is less than playlist dot length, which doesn't have parentheses after it. With parentheses after it, that's for strings. Index plus plus. And then in here you could say playlist, and then we put index in brackets equals null, which is a good default value, right? So, anyways, that's kind of what it's going to look like. The multi-arg constructor might look something more like this: public My Phone, and then a lot of times what we're going to do is we're going to pass an array of songs in to put into this array. And so we can say, well, we expect to get an array list of songs, and we're going to give it some name, initial song list. And then, then we'll expect an array of song objects. So the way you say that, you say this, song brackets, initial playlist. And then here, we don't need to initialize song list if we're just going to put another array in it. So you never have to say new array list, you could just say song list equals initial song list. So you don't have to create it because it's already been created here. We're just copying it into this declared spot already. And playlist equals initial playlist. So if we're just going to copy an object into it, we don't have to initialize it separately. So this would be end to arg constructor. So we're getting a lot of practice with stuff we've been doing in previous units, unit 2, unit 3. Now, here's something new. I'm going to kind of, some of you guys have maybe already seen this, maybe if you've kind of looked for help elsewhere, but I want to give you a new option, and you're going to see it a lot because it is pretty common. What we could do is instead of, we could do this. We could say public my phone. So this is an alternative approach to it, but an approach that you might actually want to start taking advantage of, but you got to do it the right way. So we could. It's almost all the same, except that instead of saying initial song list, let's just call it song list. Let's give the exact same name. And for this one, it's saying initial playlist, just call it playlist. Same exact name. Now this is potentially confusing. I've avoided this for a little while, okay, because you really got to understand what you're doing. I mean, using a different name, I think, is a little more clear, but this is something that is done a lot. So what you got to do is, what you want to do is you want to say, well, I'm going to put this into that one. If you say song list equals song list, that's confusing. Like, which one is which? So what you want to do is to specify the song list from this class. You say this dot song list, okay? And so that says, okay, this is a song list from up here equals song list. Like, okay, well, that one's this one, right? So this one, way up here at the top is that one. Use this key thing, this dot. And so it's kind of like saying, this dot means this class, and this private instance variable belongs to the class. And so then we could say this dot playlist equals playlist. And so you add a little clarity to which one is which, okay? And so it's fine if you guys want to start doing that, but this is the way I want you to do it. And if you mix up the order, it makes a difference because then you're going to be adding this private instance variable to this temporary variable. So these are different things. They have the exact same name, but this is only temporarily in here. And this kind of clarifies which one is which. So you guys can start using that, but make sure you're doing it right. Okay. And even if you don't want to use it, you need to be aware of it because you're going to start seeing multiple choice questions or AP free response questions and stuff like that. So it's a pretty common thing. Now I want to give you guys a little more review of what array lists are, how we work with them, and some of the cool things that we can do with them. They're really cool. We'll just add these notes over here just as like a side thing. So let's take a look at array lists and talk about how we create them and how we do different things. So, well, we already talked about how you create them, right? You could say you start with array list, and you say, okay, songs, and you say equals new array list. So this is if you're just doing it in some program, and then you put the type of thing in there, and then you put these empty parentheses afterwards. That's when you create it. You got to use the keyword new. Okay, so wait, I forgot to give it a name, song list. I'll call it song list, a variable name. Oops, that should be right there. So this is the type of thing. This is the variable that has that type of thing, and then we create it, initialize it. Now here's a cool thing. There's a bunch of different ways to add stuff to it. Okay, so let's imagine. We'll kind of draw it real small here. You have song 1, song 2, song 3. Now, if we want to do that, what we would do is we'd say, okay, well, it's called song list. So you say song list dot add, and then you could say song 1. So that's how you put things in. It's different than with an array like playlist. It's playlist. You put the brackets, and then you got to put the spot you're going to put it in, right? So this is the difference, okay, between arrays and array lists. Let me zoom in. It's kind of small. It's kind of lagging too. Come on. So we could do other ones. We could say song list. And what this does is it just adds these onto the end of the array list. And so the array list is getting bigger, but they just add them onto the end, which you might think, well, there's a problem with that. These should be lowercase s's, by the way. Because what if I want to add something in the middle or at the beginning when there's already a bunch? So this just adds a new one to the end and makes it longer. But we'll talk about it. We could do song list. Now, how do you get rid of something? You could say remove. And you could say what spot you want to remove. You say, well, I want to remove the one at spot 1. Remember, this is index 0, 1, 2. So if you did this, it would get rid of this and it would scoot this one down. So it would change the size of it, make it smaller, and song 3 would now be in index 1 and index 2 would be gone. So it resizes it. I think you could also, instead of putting the spot, you could say the thing that you wanted to remove. If you're like, well, I want to remove song 2, it would look for song 2 and remove that one wherever it was at. I think for now we'll just be identifying the location. There's another way to add things to an array list. Instead of just adding it to the end, what if you want to add it somewhere in the middle? Well, then you could say, well, I want to put it at position 1. I want to add song 3. And what that does is it sticks it into that spot and moves all the other ones down. Okay, so it doesn't replace what's there. It inserts it there and moves everything down. Moves the rest to the right. So it makes it bigger, but that's a way to put it somewhere in the middle. Now, what if you want to put it in a certain spot and take the place of the thing that's there, like replace something that's there instead of sticking it in there and moving everything down? That uses a method called set. And so if you wanted to actually set it, this is what you do. You say what spot you want to set, and then so this one actually replaces what is there. Okay, this one inserts it and moves the rest down. This one actually replaces what's there and doesn't change the size of it. Okay. How do you do this in a for loop situation? So in a for loop, how do you do this? Well, we do for int index equals 0. Index is less than song list. Now it's not dot length because that's for arrays. It's dot size. So you got to remember that dot size and index plus plus. So very similar, but you got to remember this dot size is for array lists. And you could say maybe you're checking for something. You want to remove a certain kind of thing, like if whatever, then I want to do this. I only want to remove certain songs. You could do song list dot remove index, and that would remove the one that's there and scoot everything down and resize it. Now, here's something you got to watch out for. When you do that, it resizes it and moves everything down, right? And so if you want to check the next spot, the next one actually has replaced the current spot. And if you keep going in your for loop, you're actually going to skip over the next one. because everything got moved down one. And you're going to miss the one that would have been next that now is in the current spot, right? So you have to do this. Index minus minus, you have to rewind it. You got to go backwards and check what's in that spot again. Otherwise, you're going to skip it. And that's a very common mistake. All right. Anyways, that's some ideas of how to traverse an array list. Let's see some other things to remember. Okay, so the weird thing is like all these different length things. You could add this. We have for strings, it's like name dot length with parentheses, right? For an array, it would be, say, playlist dot length without parentheses. And for an array list, it's going to be song list, just as an example, dot size. So you got to keep track of these three different things that do very similar things, and two of them have the same name, but one does that in parentheses and one does, and one's dot size. So that gets a little difficult. Now, one thing I'm going to start letting you guys use on your tests is this thing called the Java Quick Reference, which is the one thing they give you on the AP exam. And it has a bunch of common stuff on here that we do use a lot. So then you don't have to memorize these things. You need to remember everything else. The object class is dot equals a toString, integer class with capital I. We haven't done a lot of those. Min max value that Java can hold. I think we have used that sometimes. Double class. This is how you create a double. You do capital D, and then you put a regular double value in it. And then if you want to get the double value out of a capital D double object. So these are objects that are created to hold these integers, these primitives, but then you can actually do object kinds of things with them because array lists can only hold objects. Arrays can hold primitives and objects. So arrays can hold primitives, ints and all that stuff, primitives and objects like strings and stuff. But array lists can only hold objects, not primitives. So you have to create some other creative way to work with them. So they've created these object classes that actually kind of call them wrapper classes. They kind of like hold a primitive that allow you to do object kind of things to it. The string class we're doing a lot. Dot length, see, there it is. So there's the dot length. So we don't have to memorize that one. Substring, two different forms of substring. Index of we're going to use, compare to we've been talking about. And it actually tells you right here what it does. So if you're still wondering, the math class, there's absolute value function, POW, square root, random, math.random. It tells you right here, it gives you 0 to 1, but not 1 inclusive, 0 inclusive of the bracket, the parentheses, interval notation. The list class, this is where array lists are part of the list class. So this is all stuff for array list dot size. Add, which we were just talking about, that adds it to the end. Add, and you put the spot, and that's the one that scoots everything down, moving elements in position, index, and higher to the right. Get, that'll get something out of an array. Okay, I didn't show that in my example. Set replaces it, right? Remove takes it out, scoots everything down. So this has a lot of good stuff, this Java Quick Reference. This is the one thing that you'll have on the AP test. At some point, I'm going to stop letting you guys use note sheets next semester when we do practice tests. The only other thing that I think I could talk about right now that I think we've had a little bit of experience with, but maybe this might help a little more, is a for each loop. So let's see if we can talk about a for each loop. So a for each loop is like a for loop. but it's kind of like a more compact version of it. But there are some limitations to it there. It's really quick and slick, but there are some issues with things that can't be done with it. And you just got to be careful. So a for each loop. So we did a for loop down here, right? That's a bad example. We did a for loop here. So a for each loop, what it does, a for each loop, you start with for and then parentheses, and then you're going to go through an array. This only works for arrays or array lists, which we use a lot of times for loops, but we also use for loops for other things that don't involve arrays. So this is only for arrays. This is like and so you got to put the type of object that's in the array. So let's say we're going to go through the song, whatever song list, or even song library or something. I don't know, song. We'll do the array list. So song, you got to put the type of object that's in it. You have to give it kind of like a temporary name. A lot of times a letter that represents the type of object is good. And then you got to put colons. And then you got to put the name. So this is like a temporary variable. This is like a temporary variable. And then you're going to put the name of the array list. So let's say we're going to do song list. Now this also works for arrays, just like this. So it's very similar. So let's say we want to add up all the run times or something like that. You'd say, okay, well, total plus equals. So you create some variable before total, set it to 0, plus equals. Now this S is the object. It's like we're pulling the objects out of the array list and copying them to this. So this is a song. So you can do song things to it. So we could say get runtime, and then keep going. And we could say in for each loop. So it works. This is how it works. The top is a little different, okay? It copies each object out of a array list into this variable, and then you do things to it. Now here's the thing, it's a copy of it. So if you actually want to make changes to the objects in the song list, that's a little harder to do in a for each loop because this is a copy of it. So you probably can't do that. So anyways, there's just a bunch of good ideas, and I'll make a separate video where we start to work with P4A.